Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the playing of the Vice-Regal salute. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr Adam Frogley, the Manager of Indigenous Programs at Swinburne University and a member of the Wurundjeri people, to give an Indigenous welcome.
Good evening, everyone. In my language, Waminjika Wurundjeri, Balak Yumun Kundibik, Wurundjeri Nono, Bodum Bon, Wa Kundi Nagnik, Dilbading, Big Balak Bo Tulukum. And what I just said then was welcome. The Wurundjeri people welcome you to this land today, and the Wurundjeri people want you to look after and protect this land as their people did long before. Before I begin welcome to Wurundjeri country, I would like to acknowledge past and present elders, including my auntie Joy Murphy-Wandon, who has given me permission to perform Welcome to Country this evening. We, the Indigenous people, are here because of the strength and courage of our elders. Our very presence is a testament to their struggle for survival. They have left the footprints for us to follow, and they are the footprints of our Aboriginal culture, a culture from the beginning of time, a culture to be proud of, and a culture that is rich and strong. Traditionally, the Aboriginal way of preserving culture is to tell stories, and today, sharing our stories provides us with a way of dealing with the pain of the past. Through the sharing of our stories, the preservation of our long and rich heritage will be passed on to the next generation. My mother and grandfather knew of their family culture, but due to past governmental policies and practices, were never able to practice traditional customs. It is hoped in this new age of understanding and reconciliation, tradition and culture in both the Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities will continue to be acknowledged and respected. Our moiety, or spirit for this land, is the eagle, Bunjil. And Bunjil is known to us as the creator and the spirit guiding and protecting all who walk on Wurundjeri land. In fact, we are all standing on Wurundjeri land as we speak. Whilst you go about your daily lives, I encourage you to occasionally take time out to think about the traditional owners and how different things were approximately 228 years ago. My community encourages all people to learn about our culture and history. We can all learn from each other and share our experiences and cultures. The education we gain and the stories we tell can only make our own contemporary multicultural community united and stronger. On behalf of my community, the Wurundjeri, I would like to congratulate the new Chancellor, Mr Bill Scales, on his appointment, and again in my own language, Waminjika Wurundjeri, Balak Yumun Kundibik. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam Frogley. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce the Deputy Chancellor of Swinburne University of Technology, Mr Trevor Brown, to open these proceedings.
Governor, Minister, Chancellors, Vice-Chancellors and representatives from other universities, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you here this evening to the installation of Mr Bill Scales as Swinburne University of Technology's third Chancellor. This evening's ceremony is an auspicious occasion for the university. Swinburne was founded nearly 100 years ago to provide expanded and more accessible educational opportunities to residents in the outer east of Melbourne. George Swinburne, the founder of the Eastern Suburbs Technical College, as it was then known, would be extremely proud to see the result of his hard work and educational vision. From its humble beginnings in 1909, with an enrolment of 80 students and one building, Swinburne has grown and developed to become a university that provides education and training to over 40,000 students, ranging from apprentices through to doctoral students, with 6 campuses in Melbourne and 1 in Kuching, Sarawak. George Swinburne would be delighted that his legacy has continued to grow from the early days and that the institution is dedicated to providing pathways from TAFE to higher education and to being flexible in learning and teaching, focused in research and engaged with industry and the community. We are extremely honoured that Mr Bill Scales has agreed to undertake the role of Swinburne University's third Chancellor. Mr Scales has had a distinguished career in public administration and business and identifies strongly with Swinburne's mission. It is now my pleasure to introduce the University Secretary, Dr Michael Tomlinson, to deliver the proclamation of appointment to the officer of Chancellor.
Governor, on behalf of the University Council, I hereby proclaim that pursuant to Section 22 of the Swinburne University of Technology Act 1992, the Council, at its meeting on 11th of July 2005, elected Mr Bill Scales as Chancellor of the University for a term of office of 3 years, from the 1st of October 2005 until 30th of September 2008. Governor, I hereby proclaim that Mr Bill Scales has been appointed Chancellor of the University. Would Mr Scales please stand? I now have pleasure in introducing the Vice-Chancellor of Swinburne University of Technology, Professor Ian Young, to formally welcome Mr Scales.
Governor John Landy, Minister for Education and Training, the Honourable Lynne Kosky, MP, the Honourable Phil Honeywood, MP, Mr Tony Smith, MP, Dato Rashid bin Mohammed Aziz, representing Swinburne Sarawak, Dr Doug Mitchell, former Chancellor of Swinburne, Lady April Hamer, Chancellors and Vice-Chancellors, fellow members of Council and members of the Swinburne community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this important event in the history of Swinburne, the installation of our third Chancellor, Mr Bill Scales, AO. It is fitting that we have been able to stage today's proceedings in the Hawthorn Town Hall, both because of the venue itself, but more importantly because of the symbolic link it represents between the university and the community. Swinburne has made enormous progress since being proclaimed a university in 1992, just 14 years ago. Today, Swinburne is one of only 5 dual-sector universities in Australia, combining TAFE and higher education within the same institution. Through this, we have been able to achieve many synergies. For instance, the highest levels of articulation of students from TAFE to higher education in Australia. Importantly, the success rate of these students is almost identical to high-performing Year 12 school leavers. We have successfully opened up educational pathways for our youth. Today, Swinburne consists of 6 campuses in the east of Melbourne, plus an offshore campus in Sarawak, East Malaysia. Sarawak is expanding rapidly, is a critical part of our international activities and our Asian hub. Importantly, it is a full campus, actively engaged in both research and teaching. I'm delighted that through Dato Rashid, Sarawak is represented here today. The scale of Swinburne has also increased substantially, with the university educating some 40,000 students per year across TAFE and higher education. I mentioned the important role of Sarawak in our international activities. Approximately 25% of Swinburne students are international. They contribute enormously to the academic pursuits, the intellectual activities, and the cultural diversity of the university, and represent a critical element of our future. We very much see our future as an international university, educating international students here in Melbourne and with a growing offshore presence. The most spectacular development, however, at Swinburne has been in research. Research was very minor back in 1992. In that short time, Swinburne has developed key research activities in a number of areas. We have taken a very deliberate approach of building critical mass in key areas rather than spreading our limited resources across the institution. Quality rather than quantity has been our key aim. This approach has paid off. Today, our research income per member of academic staff ranks Swinburne number 3 in Melbourne, ahead of more established institutions. A remarkable achievement in a relatively short period of time. Teaching excellence, which has always been a characteristic of a Swinburne education, was recognised by the federal government in 2005 when Swinburne was one of only 5 universities in Australia recognised for the excellence of their learning and teaching through the Learning and Teaching Performance Fund. The built environment of any university campus is critically important to the activities which occur at the institution. We are partway through an ambitious $150 million plus campus redevelopment of our Melbourne campuses, which will change the face, particularly of the Hawthorn campus behind you here. Also, our Sarawak campus is undergoing a massive expansion with a $35 million development supported by our partner, the State Government of Sarawak. We hear much today of the challenges which face our universities. Indeed, there are challenges. I and my colleagues, however, believe that there are also many opportunities. The globalisation of education, exciting developments in research, and the opportunities to be entrepreneurial are all activities we embrace. I believe this view is well captured by the university's marketing and positioning line, "Let's get on with it." It captures the feeling of a young and proud institution that has made a mark and is ready to do very much more in the future. Much of what a university can achieve is shaped by the strategic direction set by its council and the critical governance role played by council. As such, the position of Chancellor is critically important to the success of the university. Swinburne has been extremely fortunate in its first 2 Chancellors, Richard Pratt and Doug Mitchell. Bill Scales is an outstanding choice as Swinburne's 3rd Chancellor. Bill is acknowledged as one of the nation's most influential public policy reformers and has held a number of high-profile leadership roles in both the public and private sectors. These roles include Group Managing Director of Regulatory, Corporate and Human Relations and Chief of Staff at Telstra, Secretary to the Department of Premier and Cabinet of Victoria, Chairman of the Industry Commission and Chairman of the Automotive Industry Authority. Among his current appointments, he is Commissioner on the Australian Government's Safety Rehabilitation and Compensation Commission, Deputy Chair of the Australian Safety Compensation Council and Chairman of the Port of Melbourne Corporation. Importantly, Bill brings to the position of Chancellor an outstanding combination of experience in both public and private sectors. Today's universities are exactly this, a blend of public and private, with critical stakeholders in both areas. We aim to be entrepreneurial, and the majority of our income comes from private activities. Government, both state and federal, are, however, still our biggest stakeholders, and the public investment in universities is significant. At Swinburne, we very much see the university as a blend of public and private. Indeed, engagement with industry and the community is one of our major strategic themes. I can think of no better background than that which Bill Scales brings to the pivotal role of Chancellor. I very much look forward to working with Bill in our respective positions. Governor, I now call upon you to formally install Mr Scales as the 3rd Chancellor of Swinburne University of Technology.
Mr Scales, as Governor of Victoria, I'm pleased to present you with this parchment in commemoration of this installation ceremony. and in recognition of the proclamation of Section 22 of the Swinburne University of Technology Act 1992, which brought into being the Board of Governors, to which you are the presiding member. By the authority vested in me as visitor of the Swinburne University of Technology, I install you as the Chancellor of this university.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the tradition of universities, there are a number of ceremonial items that are associated with the Office of Chancellor. These items are used at each official ceremony of the university and represent the history of universities and the history of this university. The first ceremonial item is the Chancellor's gown and trencher. These robes are based on traditional Oxford and Cambridge models for University Chancellors' robes, the gold embellishment being the traditional colour for Chancellors' gowns. The Chancellor wears these robes at all official ceremonies. The next ceremonial item is the University Mace. The mace dates back to medieval times when knights and warlike bishops carried it into battle. It's now a symbol of the dignity and authority of a university. The university mace is carried by the mace bearer who precedes the Chancellor in all official processions. The next item is the Chancellor's chair, in which the Chancellor sits during any official ceremony of the university. Both the mace and the chair were designed for the university by Professor Helmut Luckenhausen, Dean of Swinburne's Faculty of Design, and include symbols from the university's coat of arms. Chancellor, on behalf of the university community, I now invite you to be seated in the Chancellor's chair. Governor, I now call upon the Minister for Education and Training, the Hon Lynne Kosky, to address the Assembly.
Can I begin by acknowledging a number of distinguished guests here this evening? The Governor, John Landy, the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ian Young, the Deputy Chancellor, Trevor Brown, the immediate past Chancellor, Dr Douglas Mitchell, and of course the new Chancellor, the man we're here to honour this evening, Bill Scales. Can I also acknowledge the Honourable Phil Honeywood, Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Terry Moran, the Secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, Chancellors who are here from other universities. Can I also thank Adam Frogley from the Indigenous Program Unit at Swinburne University for his welcome to country this evening. I too would like to acknowledge the Kulin Nations as the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathered and pay my respects to their elders both past and present. Thank you very much for the great honour of speaking at the installation of the third Chancellor of Swinburne University of Technology, Mr Bill Scales AO, a man who I think is very well known to all of us from government circles, business and community circles across Victoria and Australia. And of course in football circles, and I have to say this evening, in the best football circles. Bill will fill you in later, but we share a common interest. Ceremonial occasions such as these do remind us of the importance of the tradition of universities, but they are about much more than just ceremony. They show the continued respect that we have for the values of higher learning, values such as knowledge, research, teaching, freedom of speech, and of course of collegiality. With a century of history behind its Swinburne as a technical college and a quarter of a century awarding bachelor degrees, Swinburne is part of that great tradition. And like every university in Australia, Swinburne faces a big challenge: how to maintain elite academic standards but put them to democratic use. How to put personal knowledge to public benefit. All of our universities are doing this in their own way, and I'm pleased to say that Swinburne too has risen to this challenge. Swinburne has become a university with great depth in its areas such as research, which the Vice-Chancellor Ian Young mentioned, such as advanced computing, astrophysics, brain function, and new areas such as social sustainability and well-being, the areas of creativity and design, such as design, creative arts, the performing arts, and also the acknowledged strength of Swinburne in engineering. Swinburne also has great breadth in its provision, offering qualifications from arts degrees to TAFE diplomas and PhDs across a whole range of campuses from Lilydale right through to Sarawak. And I think most impressive of all is the university's commitment to innovation in teaching through its approach to industry-based learning and problem-based learning. And as Ian Young mentioned, it recently achieved 4th place in the federal government's Learning and Teaching Performance Index, which really identifies the fact that Swinburne University not only values research, but values very much the importance of teaching and learning as part of the focus of the university. And I have to say, Chancellor, that when I met with my interstate colleagues and we discussed this index, they were thinking of all sorts of ways of rejigging the index so that they might appear higher. I somehow think that it doesn't matter how the index was developed or what it looks like, Swinburne will appear very high within that index on learning and teaching performance. One aspect of the university's program that is sure to interest Bill Scales is its role as a dual sector university. Swinburne has clearly distinguished itself as the nation's leader in the successful articulation of students between the TAFE and higher education sectors. And it has done that because it has had a very strong focus, a very clear focus on how to achieve that articulation for students. And the academic staff and all staff have played a very critical role in achieving that. The provision of flexible pathways and support programs also for articulating students has really ensured that that articulation has been successful here at Swinburne, whilst also maintaining the highest level of academic competency within its courses. And the university is well on the way to meeting its highly original goal of becoming a preeminent entrepreneurial university of the Asia Pacific. So who better to help reach that goal than Bill Scales? His life really is a textbook example of lifelong learning. From apprentice fitter to university educated economist to secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet here in Victoria to business leader and now Chancellor of Swinburne. That's what I call good TAFE university articulation. He understands the needs of government, of industry and the community and the essential interrelationship between those three. His is a record of leadership and innovation. He's proved himself a dynamic policy reformer and isn't afraid to take on big challenges, such as the chairman of the Port of Melbourne. It is an absolute wealth of experience, I think, for the university to draw upon and a great source of support, I know, for the Vice-Chancellor, but also for the teaching staff and students as they take this university into the future. Bill never shies away from an argument or a challenge, as many of us know, so long as the focus is clearly on an outcome that can be shared by many, which is often about new learning and knowledge. And so I do believe that Bill Scales' installation here tonight as Chancellor is a perfect decision by Swinburne University, but very important also for the university sector here in Victoria and across Australia. And I know that Bill will play a very strong role in the debates at all levels, at university level, at the state education level, and indeed at that national level about the importance of universities and academic learning. So the appointment of Bill Scales as Chancellor at this time of great change in the higher education sector, I believe, is very timely and very apt. Higher education and the role of universities are crucial to this state's future. They generate new knowledge, foster research and development and continue to contribute to economic growth, at the same time encouraging and enhancing social cohesion, and universities must continue this role. So I congratulate Bill on your important event this evening, your becoming Chancellor of Swinburne University and joining that very special club of Chancellors across Australia. This appointment, I think, shows great judgment by the university and consolidates the reputation of Swinburne as an outstanding institution of higher learning. Congratulations, Bill.
Thank you, Minister. I now have the honour to call upon the Chancellor of Swinburne University of Technology, Mr Bill Scales, to respond.
Governor Hon Lynne, Minister for Education and Training, the Honourable Lynne Kosky, Members of Parliament, Dato Rashid bin Mohammed Aziz, distinguished guests, my family and my dear friends. When approached to consider this most important role, I was flattered. I was intrigued and uncertain as to whether I could make a meaningful contribution to Swinburne University of Technology. But above all else, I think I was humbled by the possibility of becoming Chancellor of this very fine university. I was also aware of the quality of the two people who had previously held this role, Richard Pratt and Dr. Douglas Mitchell, and the very significant role that both of them had made to Swinburne. However, as I began to do my own due diligence, it began to dawn on me just how synergistic the work of Swinburne was and is to my own educational and career experiences. Swinburne has a fine TAFE division. I started my working life as a 15-year-old apprentice fitter and machinist, having left school at 14 after completing Year 9. It was the TAFE system that helped me to understand how I might become a productive member of the workforce. Later in my life, I had the opportunity to complete my economics degree through part-time study. Because of our family circumstances at the time, part-time study was really the only practical means by which I could ever have contemplated completing a university degree. Providing people of all backgrounds and ages with the opportunity to study at the higher education level and part-time is something at which Swinburne excels. While it's not unique for people like me to start their education at TAFE and then move on to higher education, it's certainly not the norm, with only around 7% of Australia's TAFE students taking advantage of this possibility. So learning that over 20% of Swinburne's TAFE students move on to higher education was extremely important to me when I considered whether I should take on this role. And very importantly, I have come to understand firsthand during my career in the public sector in particular, the importance of research and development in good public policy, and therefore the practical importance of research in the daily lives of most Australians. As Ian has said, Swinburne has an excellent and growing reputation for the quality of its research effort. So in the end I thought, well, maybe I just might be able to draw on my life experience and make a contribution to Swinburne University of Technology. I regard myself as being very fortunate indeed. I've had a career in the private, public and to some extent not-for-profit sector. I do understand the challenges facing these sectors today, their similarities, their differences, and the role that education and research in all of its forms plays in their development and success. So when Ian and I were discussing what I should talk, he suggested that I speak about this tonight because of the important place that education plays in helping to breach what I observe as the potential gap in the knowledge and understanding of the challenges facing each of these sectors. I think this is an important issue for Swinburne because unless we understand the differences as well as the similarities in these sectors of society and their contemporary challenges, and then go on to build that understanding into all that we do here at Swinburne, we will not fully meet the expectations of our 40,000 students, or the firms, or the governments and other organisations that employ our people. Nor will the research done by Swinburne be sufficiently relevant to the society in which we live. But before I go on and make those links, I do need to do a little scene setting. The frenetic nature of life today often disguises the rapidity of change affecting all individuals and organisations today. The advent of computer technology has accelerated that change. It's only just 11 years ago that a tiny start-up company called Netscape was publicly listed in the US. This was the first listed company marketing a modern internet search engine that today allow all of us to browse and search the net. When the first browser was developed in 1993, there were only 12 users and around 50 simple one-page websites. Today, Google, just one of the many search engines currently available, is reported to have over 100 million searches per day over its system and has over 3 billion web pages on its database. The development of the web browser accelerated a range of changes already dormant in our society. Email and the ability to search information via the net drove a rapid demand for personal computing. It completely changed the IT sector and spurred huge levels of investment in IT and communications. It also changed the way we think about organisational design and structure, and even the role of organisational leadership and management. It significantly accelerated what Peter Drucker, one of the 20th century's most insightful management thinkers, first described in the 1960s as knowledge-based work. Today it is generally accepted by most people who understand this issue that all workers, whether in services or manufacturing, mining or the public sector, are knowledge-based workers, partly because of their ready access to sophisticated information technology. Of course, advanced computerisation, digitisation and the ability to become connected with each other, no matter where in the world we are, is just one of the profound issues affecting society today. At roughly the same time that the world was digitising, it was also moving very rapidly to a series of open markets for goods, services and to some extent even labour. For Australia, the substantial reduction in tariffs, the reforms in the financial sector and the very early labour market reforms of the 80s and 90s was clear evidence of this development. In addition, the world was, and still is, attempting to understand the implications and cope with the emergence of China as an economic and strategic superpower, with all of that implies for governments, business and the world community. In the 1980s and 90s, I think it was the politicians in the public sector that understood best the need for substantial change by organisations and individuals if Australia was really going to grow and prosper in an increasingly integrated world. Not only were politicians in the public sector reforming the economy, they were actually reforming themselves. For example, they were experimenting with contracting in very highly imaginative ways. In Victoria, privatisation was widespread, and in other states and territories, they were corporatising their government business enterprises. The public sector was just as serious about labour market reform as the private sector. These reforms were applied by Labor and coalition governments. In some sense, we could describe this period as reform pull, with governments pulling the rest of society along the economic reform journey. But today, the calls for reform are coming from a very different direction. The government reforms of the 80s and 90s were so successful in forcing and in fact accelerating change in the private and to some extent the not-for-profit sector, that it's these sectors that see most clearly the need for ongoing reform. In the private sector today, the focus of successful firms is actually not on profitability per se, but very firmly on productivity. That is, continually finding ways to do more with less. In this new world of hyper-global competition, firms can literally lose substantial markets and businesses in months. When competing in world markets, nothing is certain. Most firms now understand, to paraphrase what the American economist Paul Krugman said, productivity is, in the end, isn't everything, but it's almost everything. In the private sector, we actually observe what on the face of it seem to be two contradictory views. We can observe quite rapid overall growth in particular sectors of the economy, while at the same time observe the squeeze in the profit margins of firms and organisations within those same sectors. I would argue that this is a natural consequence of hyper-global competition and the reforms in Australia of the 80s and 90s. It's therefore not surprising that business organisations throughout Australia are demanding and will continue to become even more demanding on governments for continuous reform of our economy. For example, demands for more effective and efficient regulation, improved infrastructure, continuous reviews of labour market arrangements, more skills development, more effective use of Australia's research and development funding, and continuous reviews of reforms of our tax system to help reinforce this productivity imperative. Conversely, the private sector will have to try to somehow understand the legitimate pressures placed on government today and the constraints faced by government that have very little resonance with the majority of corporate Australia. For example, unless you're part of the most senior ranks of government today, you will never truly be able to fully comprehend the full effect of 9/11 on the actions and psychology of government. I briefly mentioned earlier the not-for-profit sector in the context of government reforms of the 80s and 90s. Let me briefly make some comments about this sector and some of its challenges. This important sector is often overlooked when commentators consider the health of the Australian economy and, in fact, the operation of our broad society. Defining this sector's scope is actually not easy, but when broadly defined, it takes in elements of education, health, aged care and the arts, and it probably makes up around 15% of Australia's output. In addition to its normal philanthropic function, it is an important contributor to Australia's health, education and social services effort. It is the dominant provider of community services to children, particularly those in greatest need. It also has become the dominant provider of employment services to the long-term unemployed and a major provider of aged care services. In fact, it's not often understood, but governments today could not possibly function without the effective support of the not-for-profit sector. In many ways, the pressures facing the not-for-profit sector are very similar to those faced by the for-profit sector. It's under significant pressure to improve its productivity and reduce its costs. It's facing a potential and very serious labour shortage. It's also subject to a substantial and increasing regulatory burden. It's facing growing demands for an ever-increasing level of quality and accountability. But these pressures are compounded by what I might describe as ambivalence to government that has its origins in the sector's often conflicting role as both a provider of government service and, quite appropriately, a vocal advocate for those using its services. The challenge and pressures on the not-for-profit sector create many significant challenges for government. But one important lesson from the 1980s and 90s is that governments and the public sector seem to better understand the reform imperative and the need for ongoing reform in all sectors if they are fully engaged in that journey themselves by being committed to their own reform. Let me now try and draw together some of these themes and attempt to explain what relevance it might have to Swinburne University of Technology. I've argued that we're now in a period of rapid, accelerating and unpredictable change. What we're observing today, I would suggest, is reform push, where business and the not-for-profit sector are demanding that governments urgently address issues which are impeding them from fully achieving their potential. In short, one of our greatest challenges is to find ways for all sectors of our society to search, debate and decide how best to improve Australia's overall performance for the good of all our citizens. I would suggest that it's institutions such as Swinburne that can help our students, our government, and the not-for-profit sector and the community at large to understand these complex issues, to create the opportunity for a dialogue on these questions, and to give organisations and individuals the ability to constructively respond to these pressures and changes. We can specifically do this by providing high-quality TAFE and higher education service, and simply by educating people well. Being a major provider of high-quality and targeted research, by being involved in public debates without fear and without favour in areas where we have significant expertise. In short, Swinburne University of Technology can help by continuing to be an important part of the vision set for higher education in general, that is, to be central to Australia's development in the 21st century. Finally, can I sincerely thank every one of you for being here tonight. I'm deeply moved and honoured. I do hope that during my period as Chancellor of this fine university, I might be able to make at least a modest contribution to Swinburne and to the future of all those who come in contact with it. While I'm very naturally uncertain about the contribution I can make, there are some things about which I'm completely certain. I'm certain that as I continue to meet our researchers, I will be able to confirm to them that if they do their research well, Australians will be the big winners. I know this because I've seen it happen in practice. I'm certain that as I continue to meet our TAFE, undergraduate and postgraduate students, I can say to them that if they excel in their chosen course of study, they will, one day, lead our nation. I know this to be true because I've seen it happen to others who are just like them. And maybe when walking through our campus late one evening, I might just meet a bright, enthusiastic 15-year-old just beginning a wonderful life journey with the assistance of our TAFE division. And when I do, I will look that young person straight in the eye, and without equivocation and complete conviction, I'll be able to say, work with us, complete your selected course of study, no matter how difficult that might seem right now, never stop learning, and life can be anything you actually want it to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor. I now have pleasure in calling upon the Deputy Chancellor of Swinburne University of Technology, Mr Trevor Brown, to formally close this evening's proceedings.
Governor, Minister, Chancellors, Vice-Chancellors, representatives from other universities, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the conclusion of this installation ceremony. May I convey special thanks to the Governor, Hon Lynne, and the Minister for Education, the Honourable Lynne Kosky, for their contribution to this evening's proceedings. Swinburne, although proud of its past, is always looking to the future and continues to gain a strong reputation in Australia and overseas as a provider of career-oriented education and as a university with a personal scale and a commitment to focused research. Swinburne's staff and graduates are forward-thinking, flexible, enterprising, and display a can-do attitude. I would like to congratulate Mr Bill Scales on his installation as the third Chancellor of Swinburne University of Technology and offer on our behalf all members of Council our divided support in helping him and Swinburne to achieve their future goals. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us on this very special occasion and joining with us to welcome Swinburne's new Chancellor. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the formal part of this ceremony. On behalf of the members of Council and the university community, I would like to invite you to join us for refreshments which will be served in the chandelier room to your right. Would you now please stand as the Governor, the new Chancellor and members of the procession leave the hall.